All right, everyone, welcome back. Good morning today. It's about 3.5 minutes till 9 a.m., so just getting things underway, and in a few minutes the lecture will start, but I hope you guys are doing well. Good morning, guys. Welcome to class. Hey, Eva. I don't know if you got my email. I haven't checked again my inbox since I sent you that message yesterday, but maybe you got a chance to resend your essay. You let me know, I guess, either way. Hey, Drew, how's it going? Oh, okay, good. All right, well, I'll definitely get a chance to look at it. If not this morning, then maybe this evening. Latest possible would be early in the morning tomorrow, so you still have 24 hours to make any edits, but it's definitely something I'll get to. Okay, guys, just a few more moments and we'll be good to go. Good morning, Kelly. Hi, how's it going? All right, so just a couple of moments to go here and then we'll begin. All right, it's 9 a.m., so thanks everybody for waking up and coming to the meeting. Appreciate you guys' attendance as usual. And we have another lecture on our final topic today. So we're going to wrap up the last couple of notes on Plato's article called On the Harmony of the Soul from his classic book, The Republic. And then we will take a different look at a new author on the same subject of life. What makes a life well lived? What is it to live a good human life? So that's our current subject matter. And let me just kind of review some of the things we covered on Monday with Plato, and then we'll kind of wrap him up in a few moments. So Plato, with his great teacher, Socrates, has ideas about what it takes to live a good human life. And this is all spelled out in his big classic work called The Republic. The Republic essentially gives the reader a vision of like a perfected society, like a ideal human society for people to live and flourish in. In the Republic, okay, there's a structure to the society that he describes, which is supposed to be somewhat parallel to the structure of the ideal individual human life. So he says that the Republic would be separated into three categories, three parts of society. if you guys remember, then these three parts were the merchants, the warriors, and kings. So merchants are just like people who produce goods and services, trade and sell them for profit. That's the largest class in society. And then there's also the warrior class. That is those who provide for security and defense, like soldiers or military or police. And then there are the kings, which are those who institute the policies, create the rules, and basically run the society. So those are the leaders, the equivalent of our like political leadership class. And in the Republic, people would be sorted into these different categories based on a rigorous system of testing and evaluation at various stages in their educational process. So you wouldn't have just the liberty to choose which part of society you wanted to join. It would be determined based on your actual aptitude measured in testing. So the next thing that's mentioned is that if these parts of society are doing their job at the highest level excellently well, then they would have a virtue, which is a quality that a thing has when it's capable of doing its job at a high level, at an excellently good level. So like we said, that the virtue of a knife would be to be sharp, because a sharp knife is good at cutting, which is what knives are there to do. That's their function. And so in society, these different parts of the Republic have virtues as well, if they're working as well as they can. So the virtue of the merchant class, what was that? Temperance, meaning having moderation or self-control over your appetites. So not being basically too greedy, too selfish, or too desirous of gaining more or profiting. And then you've got the warrior class that are the fighters. And if they're going to be good fighters and so on, then they have to have courage, which is the willingness to face danger in the right situation. And then the kings should be wise. The virtue of the kings is wisdom, because if they make the policies, then they have to make good decisions based on the right judgment. And if they're not wise, then they wouldn't be able to do that. So, okay, there's the three parts of the Republic and the virtue of each. Now, this is supposed to be a parallel to the individual human soul. So the human soul, according to the Greek thought, also has three compartments or three divided parts. So one of the three parts, which is supposed to be parallel to the merchants, is the appetitive part of the soul. That's the part of your soul that has appetites, desires, and wants to fulfill them. Kind of like the merchants, because they want to profit and make money, so there's appetite built into both. Then there's the spirited part of your soul. That's the part of you that wants to compete, win, has a lot of pride and passion. And so that's kind of like the equivalent of the warriors. And then there's the rational part in you, which is like the voice of reason, the intellect, the wise decision maker who carefully weighs evidence and makes the right call. That's the rational part of you, which is comparable to the king's. Okay, and so each of the parts of your soul, so it's argued, should exhibit the virtue that is distinctive of it. So your appetites should be moderate and temperate. Your spirited nature should be courageous, and your rationality should be wise. If these parts all work according to their virtue, and also, this is key, cooperate and harmonize, don't try to interfere with the duties or tasks of the other parts. So basically each function within the soul or state does its own job, not the job of any other, and they all willfully and peacefully submit to the rule of the king instead of trying to challenge or overthrow it, then that would be a well-ordered state or soul. Take your pick, either one. If they have that kind of harmony and balance, exhibiting their given virtue, each case, then that would be a just soul or a just state. So after that, we had gotten to the point where there's this one additional thing that's mentioned there. After this, Plato and, well, his teacher Socrates in the dialogue, who's talking to Glaucon, Plato's older brother, he asks this kind of interesting question. If you could do something, if you could be unjust, but you could never get caught, would that be to your advantage? Would you benefit from unjust and bad behavior as long as there was no penalty or punishment or accountability for you? Now, I understand that there's a way of looking at it where you might think, sure, yeah, if I could like cheat on everything and steal it all the time and no one ever found out about it, then I'd be the winner because I would get all the stuff that benefits me from cheating or from stealing or from lying or, you know, whatever the case is. Maybe someone thinks the only real bad consequence of being that way is if you get caught, found out, and then you're in trouble. But he says, no, it's not even just that. Even if nobody knows at all and no one could know or find out about the unjust behavior, you would still be harmed and it would still be to your disadvantage and it would not be in your best interests, even if there was no accountability. So why is that? Okay, so does injustice profit you? Can injustice benefit or profit you? And he says no to that. To give his answer and why he says no, he invites us to think of a little, it's like a visual metaphor, okay? So this is like a strange visual metaphor in a way, but let's go through it because Plato talks about it. So he says, I want you to imagine, if you can, a three-headed creature, okay? It's a three-headed creature, and let me just try and show you by a drawing if I can. It's not going to be great, but the sort of visual that he's trying to give you, okay? So three-headed creature, here we go. Okay, now the description of the three heads, the one is a little bit weird because one of the three, so to speak, is like a section of a bunch of little ones. So there's like off to the side a bunch of little snapping gargoyle heads, okay? So that's this part, all these little guys. Let's imagine that these little circled things are like gargoyle heads. They're snapping, they're hungry, they want to eat, okay? They basically are just full of appetite, they're just always desiring something, they need to be satisfied. That's one of the heads, even though it's like a section with a bunch of little guys, but let's think of that as one of the three. Okay, now over here, there's another head, and let's say this one is like a lion. Okay, so my artwork definitely can be criticized, and that's fair, but can you hopefully see that this is a lion, okay? That's a lion, all right? And it's, you know, powerful, strong, noble, like a lion is. And then you've got the third head here, which is just a human. So that's like a normal human head in the middle, like me or you. Okay, now, what's going on with this is that these three heads, it's like a metaphor for the three different parts of the soul that we've been describing here. So maybe you can track the analysis given by Plato here to this example he gives. So if you were going to guess, what would you think these the big gargoyle, bitey, hungry, snapping guys are? They represent what part of the soul, if you were to judge? Gargoyle section, part of the three-headed creature, is to signify which of the three parts of the soul, based on the nature of the different parts of the soul, and based on, yeah, so it's the appetitive part. Good, Jason. That's the appetite part, because these are the ones that are constantly like seeking the satisfaction of their appetites. Okay? What about the lion or whatever? So you got one, that's out of the way. The appetitive part, those are the gargoyles. What of the lion? Okay, good. The lion is the spirited part, you know, like the noble lion, king of the jungle, protective, dominant, feisty, you know, etc. Okay? Skilled at hunting and all of that. So that's like the warrior part. And then the human part, you know, a human being. This is clearly then, I mean, in a way it's process of elimination, but you could tell me still, what do you think? The human is what? Yes, well, yeah, it's the rational part, that's correct. So it's the rational part of you, the intellect, the smart part that will make good decisions and stuff. Okay, so now, he says, imagine it like this. This is a creature with three heads, but whenever this thing interacts with others, they only see one of the three heads, like on the outside. So they don't see this situation of three. They only see the one. The outside covering, viewed from a third-person observer's perspective, they just see which one do you figure. To all observers, to all who see, the being, which actually has three heads, only appears to have the one, and it looks as though it's a what? So only one of these shows to outside people, even though on the inside there are the three. What do you think is the one that's, you know, apparent to all who look? Of the three. There's just one that can be seen by other people. So which one? Yes, that's right. Good. So the human part, right? So the rational, the human head is the one that shows up. So everybody else just looks at this creature and they're like, oh, that's a person like me, just normal. But here, let me imagine this. On the inside, what other people cannot see, what's going on behind the scenes, okay, is that they're all fighting. And let's suppose that on the inside there is this tense struggle and conflict among the three parts. So like the gargoyle heads, they're starting to get really aggressive, and they're like almost attacking the human part, like biting and lunging at him, so that he has to kind of cower in fear and submission. And even as he's doing that, the lion is getting all rowdy and is also, taking some bites and, lunges at the head of the human as well. So inside, let's imagine that the human head is overwhelmed and dominated by these other not as smart, not as reasonable parts of the creature. Okay. To the outside view, we just see a human. But what's going on inside is not good, okay? What's going on inside is that the parts are not cooperating. They're fighting against each other. They're trying to overthrow this part inside so that they can take control. Now, he says that's sort of what it is when you behave in an unjust way and nobody else knows about it. The similarity in this description is that to all people who look in, they just see a human being and they just see a normal human face. So there's no way of seeing the real internal configuration of their soul. But when you are unjust, you basically magnify the power of these subordinate parts of the soul. You make them stronger and more powerful, like you focus more on what your appetites are or your passions, and you set your reason and your intellect aside. When you do that, you're basically causing the parts of your soul to live in tension with each other and in conflict with each other. They're not in harmony. And so even if no one else in the whole world knows about what's going on there, inside, you're not at peace. The parts of your soul are in an inner conflict with each other. So he says, you're going to pay a price. You're going to corrupt your soul and damage it when you behave in an unjust way. And that's a punishment that you do to yourself. And that is the cost of being unjust, even if there's no social penalty that comes to you, and even if there's not even any awareness by other people that a penalty would be appropriate. You're still harming yourself, and you're doing something that really damages the just configuration of your soul. So you're doing a harm to yourself that nobody else can do, because who could corrupt your soul? No one else can do that except you. I cannot, for example, look at you and say, hey, you, bam, I just corrupted your soul. Now you're corrupt inside. I can't do that. You're the only person who can say, well, I'm going to allow my reason to be subordinated to my passions of the moment or to my appetites of the moment. I'm going to go and turn away from my intellect and better judgment to do things that I think are against my better judgment. You're the only kind of person that can make yourself do such things. And so when you harm your soul this way, you're doing a direct harm that's very powerful and abiding, and it's something that no one else can do to you. So why would you do that? That's bad for you. So he's trying to tell you, don't be misled or confused into thinking that just behavior bears no reward and unjust behavior can be to your advantage. No matter what advantage you may think that you're getting from unjust behavior, you're really doing harm to yourself. Your soul's becoming corrupt. And on the inside, you're not at peace then. Think of the life of people who don't let wisdom guide their course. Like, I don't know, take like a drug addict or something. This person's giving everything to their appetites. And even though there's a voice inside that says, you shouldn't probably be living this way, this isn't the best thing for you, they ignore it and they pursue a self-destructive path just because they're in the, thrall of the powerful appetites that are overwhelming their better judgment. So people will mess their lives up, putting their soul at war with itself and the parts of it in case they don't follow the just path. And so he says, if people out there tell you, you should just do bad things and get away with it. That's the smart way to live. Cheat, lie, steal, commit fraud, and just get away with it. As long as you do, then you'll be better off. Plato's here to tell you that people who say this to you do not understand what's good and bad for you, and that if you follow their lead and their example, you're going to harm yourself. So those people don't even have your best interests in mind. And I'll read you the way he puts it. So I'm going to show you a couple of the quotes here to bring this into context. So here he is talking to Glaucon, Socrates. He says on page 746, he said, so Socrates says, I think someone said at some point that injustice profits a completely unjust person who is believed to be just. Is that true? Glaucon says, certainly. Socrates responds, well, then let's discuss this, since we've now agreed on the power that injustice and justice have. Glaucon says, how? Socrates replies, by creating an image of the soul in words, so that the person who says this will know what they're saying. Glaucon says, what image? Socrates tells him, one like those creatures that legends tell us used to come into being in ancient times, such as the Chimera, Scylla, Cerberus, or any of the multitude of others in which many different kinds of things are said to have grown together naturally into one. And he says, yes, legends tell us of these things. So he continues, so then, fashion a single kind of multicolored beast with a ring of many heads that it can grow and change at will, some from gentle and some from savage animals. He says that's work for a clever artist. However, since words are more flexible than wax, consider it done. Okay, then fashion one other kind, that of a lion, and another of a human being. But make the first, the gargoyle part, the largest, and this one second to it in size. And he says that's good, the sculpting is done, like mentally, all right? Now join the three of them into one so that they somehow grow together naturally, one creature. Okay, they're joined. He says, then fashion around them the image of one of them, that of the human being, so that anyone who sees only the outside covering and not what is inside will think that it is a single creature, a human being. Okay? He says, all right, then if someone says that injustice profits the human being and that doing just things does not bring an advantage, let's tell them what they are saying. You're saying that it is beneficial for you to feed this beast, make it strong, and the lion, and all that pertains to him, but also to starve and weaken the human being within so that he is dragged along wherever either of the other two leads. Okay, so like if you sell out your intellect and reason and you allow your passions, appetites to become dominant in your life, then your better judgment is just going to be taken for a ride wherever these impulses, passions, or appetites lead you. And so they'll be dragged along wherever either of the other two leads. And third, leave the parts to bite and kill one another instead of accustoming them to each other and making them friendly. And that's what a person that praises injustice is signing you up for. But on the other hand, wouldn't somebody who maintains that just things are profitable be saying first that all our words and deeds should ensure that the human being within the human being has the most control? Second, that he should take care of the many-headed beast as a farmer does animals, feeding and domesticating them, preventing savage ones from growing, and he should make the lion's nature his ally, care for the community of all parts, and bring them up in a way such that they will be friends with each other and with himself. So when you're just, these parts of the soul are in harmony, they cooperate, and they peacefully and willfully submit to the proper rule of the intellect within you. That's a well-ordered soul. That's a soul that's at peace and harmony, and that's better for you and also for all with whom you interact. So he says that's what someone that praises justice is saying. So this is kind of a powerful quote then at the end of 746. He says, from every point of view then, anybody who praises justice speaks the truth, and anybody who praises injustice speaks falsely. And that's whether we look at it from pleasure, good reputation, or advantage. A praiser of justice tells the truth, and one who condemns it has nothing good to say and does not know what they're talking about. So he's basically giving you I guess, so that's pretty much it. At the end, he reinforces this point once again by saying, think about it like this, okay? Suppose you have a dear loved one, like your mom or little sibling or whoever, and somebody told you, I want to make a trade with you. I'm going to give you as much money as you want. You name your price, and all I need is for you to allow me to take that loved one of yours and just, I could do whatever I want with them. I'm a weird, crazy person. I'm going to torture them and stuff. Now, if you did that exchange and you get like $100 billion, like your mom, sister, daughter, whatever it is, would that benefit you? I mean, in some kind of like just superficial financial sense, I guess you'd benefit, but not in the sense of like you're better off as a human being and your soul is in a better state. So he says that's kind of like what you do when you sell out the human part of you in order to gratify the other lower portions of the soul. Why would you do that? thinking that you're going to obtain some kind of reward when you're actually undermining the best and most godly part of you. So here's what he says on that note. In light of this argument, can it profit anyone to acquire gold unjustly if by doing so he enslaves the best part of himself to the most vicious? If you got gold by enslaving your son or daughter to savage and evil men, it would not profit you, no matter how much gold that you got. How then can you fail to be wretched if you pitilessly enslave the most divine part of yourself to the most godless and polluted one, and accept golden gifts in return for a more terrible destruction? So that's how he kind of closes his discussion here. Moral of the story, I guess: achieve the balance and harmony among the parts of your soul. Allow reason to preside over everything. Defer to your intellect when you have to do things and make decisions. Don't allow the lower parts of your soul to dominate, because they're not fit to rule. Just like warriors are not fit to rule the republic, just like the merchants are not fit to rule the republic, the wise kings are. And there's a wise element within you. So you should let it be the sort of North Star that guides you along in cooperation and in harmony with the other parts of your soul, which also have important roles, but which should not overstep their boundaries to try and seize power over your entire course of conduct. Because if that happens, you'll behave unjustly, and there's both the possibility of social accountability, and even if not, the soul itself is harmed inside, whether anyone knows or not. Okay, so we can then move on from the Plato. Injustice doesn't profit you, according to that metaphor. That was the main thing that I wanted to continue to add to the Plato notes. But we have to continue from there. So there's not just one account of what makes a human life go well. Plato's view is, I think, considered important historically, and of course it still has many people who would follow along in that way of thinking, but there are alternatives also, different views, and so we're going to see another one. Now we're going to zoom way ahead into the future, like a couple thousand years, much closer to the current day, and this is the writing of this philosopher. So his name is Jean-Paul Sartre. Okay, that's a French philosopher of the 20th century. So he lived from 1905 until 1980. It's French, so his name is Jean-Paul Sartre. It's kind of hard to pronounce those French R's for the English tongue, but Jean-Paul Sartre or whatever, that's the way he's sort of said. He wrote some important books in philosophy. He's kind of a pioneer of a whole philosophical movement and idea, which is called existentialism. And the article that we're reading today is just titled Existentialism, and it gives us a brief kind of summary of some of the major points of that philosophical system and viewpoint. So existentialism. Existentialism by Jean-Paul Sartre. We're looking at a lecture that he gave in Paris in 1945, which then later was printed as a published paper. So that's what the textbook contains, this written version, the published version of his 1945 speech here in Paris. And this was just a talk where he was explaining the main points of existentialism to like an audience of philosophers. So we're going to get the basics of the view and what it's all about. All right, now, when it comes to existentialist thought and philosophy, there's a lot of subtlety, there's a lot of depth, nuance. A person could and can take like a whole semester-long class just on existentialist writers. So what I'm going to be able to do is really give you a very brief, condensed summary of the idea of existentialism, but I'll try my best to give you the essence of it. In fact, I probably shouldn't have used the word essence just yet, because that's something that we're actually now going to discuss. So the first main point of existentialism that brings you into understanding it is this key slogan or statement. There's a principle that is right at the heart of existentialism, and it's this idea that existence precedes essence. So look at that statement there. It says existence precedes essence. Those simple three words are really the heart, the core of existentialism. So let's try and investigate what this really means. Let's go into, first of all, the word precede. I think that's one that probably many of us have a sense of. What does it mean for one thing to precede another? Can anybody tell me? What is the concept of to precede? If A precedes B or something like that, what does that mean about the relation between the two? Who can tell me this? It's just a common word. Okay, good, Eva. To happen before. Right. So like your high school graduation preceded your enrollment in this class, I would say, right? So like that happened before, now you're in college. Your 12th birthday preceded your 13th birthday. So like, of course, you were 12 before you were 13. So precede, to come before. Very good. In other words, then, what this says is that existence comes first before essence. And what that means is that we human beings, when we begin, we just exist. And we don't have an essence yet, but we develop that essence later. So existence is first, and then essence develops from there afterward. But now we have to continue by thinking about this word. What is essence? What is the essence of something? Now, this might be a little bit more mysterious or vague to us, but do any of you have a thought or even an intuition about what it means to speak of an essence of something? Like what does this term essence mean? Do you have any view or thought about that? What could that be? Essence, no? Well, while you're thinking about it, a way of putting it, your characteristics and personality, in the case of a human being, that's fair. Essence overall refers to kind of like the core, essential, defining features of something. You say soul, well, I kind of see where you're coming from. Because in a way, sometimes people speak about like their soul as like their most core, essential qualities and attributes, personality traits, characteristics, disposition. So yeah, the essence of a thing are just its kind of core, necessary defining features. So essence. Now, I know that word essential is in the definition, so if you don't want that because it seems too circular, you could say the core or necessary defining features of something. But that's a reasonable way to put it. Let's work through an example then, okay? Take the geometric figure of a square. Can any of you guys tell me what is the essence of the square? The essence, the necessary, essential features that a square has to have to even be a square. So what is the essence of the square? I think we can say this. Just thinking about it for a moment. What do you know? I'm talking about geometry. So there's got to be four sides, right, but there's also rectangles. Okay, good, Senna. There have to be four equal sides, yes. But there are like diamond shapes, which could have four equal sides. Ah, that's also good, Eva. There have to be four sides of equal length with the interior angles each being right angles, 90-degree angles. Now, we've defined right there the essence of a square. Is it true that every square has four sides? Yes. So that's not optional. That's essential. That's necessary. Is it required that they be of the same length each side? Yes. Otherwise, we are defining a different polygon. So that's of the essence of the square, those features that you guys have just listed. Four sides, equal length, interior angles that are 90 degrees. Now, if I say the color blue, is that part of the essence of the square to be blue? Is that essential? Like the interior portion of the polygon shaded blue, is that essential? No, it's not essential. I mean, you could have a blue square, or you could have red, green, yellow, or any other color, but it doesn't have to be blue to be a square. It does have to have four sides, though. So we can now see essential and non-essential qualities in the way I'm describing this. Okay, so now back to us, human beings. I use the square just as a given example to help you understand this word. But when we talk about the essence of people, like us, now we are talking kind of like what you said above, I think, who was it that made the comment, Senna, that like the essence of me or you would be our core defining attributes and traits that make us the unique individuals that we are, okay? So think about the things that you would say to somebody if they asked you to give a very deep and personal description of who you essentially are, right? So like, what kind of things do you think a person would say to reveal the core essence of their being, of their personality and their characteristics? Like, you'd probably have to say, for example, what sort of things? Like, what is the essence of a person? And by the way, it's not going to be like physical features, because those are things that you don't choose. So we're talking about qualities of you that are developed in the course of your life. So essential and defining traits or attributes of a person could be things like what? Like, I mean, someone says, who are you? What are you all about? You'd tell them such things as what? What do you think? Fundamental, basic things that you'd want to let a person know. If they were going to know who you are as a human being, what makes you the unique person that you are, different from, let's say, the next person to your right or left. Okay, personality traits, right? So you might say whether you are more outgoing, more introverted, what your interests are. Are you a person who likes art? Are you more into, I don't know, sports? What is your major in school? Do you have religious beliefs? What are they? Or do you not have those? What are your political beliefs or views? You know, what kind of taste do you have in music, in fashion, in culture, etc.? So those kind of things would be the stuff you'd tell someone, so they would get a sense of who you are as a human being. If you just say human being, that doesn't really get down to anything specific. So your essence is kind of your own. And this, what it's saying is, human beings are first born and we don't have an essence. So we're kind of born into this world and we are just a blank slate. A baby born today is not a conservative or a liberal or a Christian, Jew, Muslim, or atheist. That's going to happen as time passes. But on day one, the essence isn't there yet. It'll happen though over time. It will fill in over time. Now, where do you think that the essence comes from according to existentialist thought? If it's not there at the beginning, then what causes it to form? This is another important point to cover, and this is right there at the heart of the view as well. So where do you think these existentialists argue that the essence comes from? Where does that derive from? It's not there immediately, so what creates it? Okay, so you say experience, Senna. I see what you mean, like the conditions of your upbringing and the community that you're in, the time period that you live in. That's one way to look at it, but to be honest, these existentialists believe that it has less to do with the environment and more to do with the individual. In fact, they say it has everything to just do with the individual and your freedom of choice. So to existentialists, who's the creator of your essence? Look in the mirror, it's just you. The existentialist, and this is something they insist on, you are the author of your own essence. Why are you the type of person that you are sitting there watching this lecture? Why are you the conservative or liberal or Christian or atheist or, fan of one genre of film or one genre of music as opposed to another? Why are you that way? Why are you like this? According to existentialism, look no further, you're the one. It's your free choice and your free will that chooses to create the essence that you've got. So according to existentialism, we each establish our own essence through the course of our life, through our free will and our choices. So you are the one who gets total responsibility for the way that your essence has turned out. If you like the way that you are, take all the credit because you've done that. If you don't like something about the way you are, then you also have to shoulder the responsibility and the blame for it, because no other force, no other external factor can cause your essence to be what it is. So the first point of existentialism is to try and get each one of us to appreciate the full responsibility that we bear for our own individual essence. They insist that you not try to shift that responsibility to any outside factor, like as if you say, oh, don't blame me. The reason I'm like this is because look at how I was raised by my parents, or think about the community that I grew up in or the time period that I lived in. Any such attempt to shift the responsibility of your essence to something else that you control over is what they call bad faith. So that's another key term in existentialism. The word is bad faith. And if there's anything that's like a bad thing or a no-no in the thought of existentialism, it's to be this way. Bad faith is simply when you try to shift the responsibility for your essence, or when you attribute your essence to factors that you got no control over. Okay, when you attribute your essence to factors that you could not control, that's bad faith. So you're the way you are because you've planned to be that way. Let me read then from the words of the author, and you can see his statement on that. So he says this. Now that we've described his view a little bit, these words will make a bit more sense. On page 749, he says, man is nothing else but what he makes of himself. Such is the first principle of existentialism. It is also what we call subjectivity. But what do we mean by this? Let me say one word before I continue. He believes that this fact about us humans, that we create our own essence, is something that makes us more special, unique, and dignified than everything else in the universe. Take like a dog that's born today. That dog is going to live out the pattern of life that pretty much every other dog ever does. I mean, there'll be some small minor differences according to its situation, but it's going to basically live, die, in some cases maybe breed, pass on its genes, homeostasis, food. But at the end of the day, that's the life of the dog. With a human born today, though, how many possibilities are there? Will this be an architect, musician, business person? Will this be like an activist? Will this be a politician? Or will this just be a person who is a high school dropout, that values things that don't have anything to do with academic learning? All those possibilities are wide open. Will this be a religious human being, an atheist, a conservative, liberal, whatever? The human can take their life in infinitely many directions because we've got free will and freedom of choice. So we're different than, let's say, lower animals. We're also different from inanimate objects. I mean, like a leaf that's blowing in the wind has no ability to say, I want to go in that direction. It's just, caught up in the physical forces that carry it along. But me and you are human beings. According to existentialism, we do have free will. And so unlike those other things I've mentioned, we alone have the ability to shape our own destiny and create our own essence. So he says this here. What do we mean if not that man has a greater dignity than a stone or a table? We mean that man exists, that man is first of all a being who hurls himself towards the future and who is conscious of imagining himself in the future. Right? So like you think of your future, you think of, where will I be in 5 years, 10 years? Where do I want to take my life? Man is at the start a plan, which is aware of itself, not a patch of moss, a piece of garbage, or a cauliflower. There's random stuff he mentions. Nothing exists prior to the plan that you have. You will be what you have planned to be. Because by the word will, we generally mean a conscious decision, which is subsequent to what we have already made of ourselves. And now he gives an example of some of the things that you would do to form your essence through your free will. I may want to belong to a political party, write a book, get married. But all that is merely a manifestation of a choice, which we call will. If existence really does precede essence, man is responsible for what he is. So existentialism's first move is to make every man aware of what he is and make the full responsibility of his existence rest on him. Okay, so you got to basically own it. There's a saying that says, with great freedom comes great responsibility. And so in the viewpoint of an existentialist, you are free, and you have freedom to shape your essence, and that's what you are doing right now and throughout your whole life. But because you're the one who creates this self, you're creating your own being, and you're creating your own essence, you have to take the responsibility for it. You got to own it. You got to stand on that. Like, that's your essence. So don't try and shift the blame away from yourself to other things. That would be bad faith. Okay, now, sort of building on this point, he says, if you think about it, it's a little bit of a metaphor, but by creating your own essence, you also simultaneously kind of create all of humanity. Now, what does he mean when he says that when you create your own essence, you also create all of humanity? Well, this is his point here. When you create your essence, you create a person in the blueprint of how you think people should live. So by creating your own case, that also stands as the example that you would put forward to everyone else as to how a life ought to be lived. So by creating your own essence, you also create a model yourself of how all humanity should live. That is the reason that he says this obscure sounding thing where he says, when you create yourself, you create all of humanity. Now, understand he doesn't mean that literally. Literally, you just only create yourself in your essence. So why does he say you also create all of humanity? Well, it's kind of it's a metaphor, because when you create the essence that you have, that reflects your values, okay? And if that reflects your values, then if anyone else were to adopt the same choices, you would approve of those choices, you'd validate them because they're the same as yours. And you demonstrate that you care about those things because you chose them. So like, for example, I'm a philosophy professor. That was my choice. People make different choices, but here I am teaching you philosophy at Chapman. And so suppose that a student comes to me and says, I want to major in philosophy. I'm interested in going forward and becoming a professor of philosophy. Me, if they're speaking to me, do you think I would tell them, what a dumb choice? That's not a good decision. Or do you think I would say, that is a good thing to do with your life? And I think that that's something I approve of. What do you believe would be my reaction to some student making this statement to me based on my choices in life? Do you think that I would find it good or bad for someone to choose philosophy? I would approve of it. And isn't it obvious why? Because if I didn't approve of it, then I certainly wouldn't have done it myself. So I demonstrate through my own life and through my own choices that that's something that I care about, and that I think if others did it, they'd be making a good choice too. So in a way, by being this person that I am, I hold myself forward to the world as an example of how people should live. So in existentialist thought, there is no one set paradigm of how we all should live. Instead, they say each one of us establishes our own essence, and that already serves as our personal picture of how we think all people should do it. So like the way I'm doing it is by hypothesis, the way that I think people should live. And I show that by the way I'm acting and living. Another case, okay? Suppose that someone is like a religious person, a Christian. If another person is a Christian, do you believe that they would say that's a good choice that they made? Or they would say, I don't like the choice that this other person made to believe in Christianity? Of course not. If you're a Christian, then you believe it. And if others do, then you agree with the choice they make because it reflects your same attitude and your same values. So obviously you're not really in a position to be critical of a life that's patterned in the same shape as your own. That's why he says that we each create in our own person a model and example of how we think the best life would be. And so let me now read on so you'll hear him say that. He says, subjectivism. So, okay, yeah. When we say that a man is responsible for himself, we don't mean that he's responsible for his own individuality only, but that he is also responsible for all mankind. Subjectivism means on the one hand that an individual chooses and makes himself, and on the other that it is impossible for man to transcend his subjectivity. When we say that man chooses his own self, we mean that every one of us does likewise, but we also mean by that in making the choice, you also choose all humanity. In fact, in creating the man, he uses man as just a generic phrase for human beings, so man or woman or whatever, but in fact, in creating the man that we want to be, there is not a single one of our acts which does not at the same time create an image of man as we think he ought to be. To choose to be this or that is to affirm the value of what we choose, because we can never choose what we think is bad from our own point of view. We choose the good, and nothing can be good for the one without also being good for others, at least according to your view. So, if existence precedes essence, and if we exist and fashion our image, then that is valid for everybody and for our whole age. Thus, our responsibility is much greater than we might have supposed, because it involves all of mankind. Now, here's a good quote. If I am a working person and choose to join a Christian trade union rather than to be a communist, And if by being a member, I want to show that the best thing for man is religion, then I'm not only involving my own case, I'm choosing for all. As a result, my action has involved all humanity. To take a more individual matter, if I want to marry, to have children, even if this just depends on my own circumstances, I'm involving all humanity in monogamy and not merely myself. Therefore, I am responsible for myself and for everyone else. I'm creating a certain image of man of my own choosing. In choosing myself, I choose for all man to be this way. So, like, if you had gotten married, then you're not going to be a person who says, why do people get married? How dumb is that? Because they would make the same choice that you make, and therefore you value such choices as shown by your own personal behavior. Don't misunderstand his claim, though. I've sometimes seen students try to report on this and say, what he means by when you create yourself, you create all of humanity is like you influence other people to be like you. You like actually cause them to want to be like you. That's not what he's saying. Even if nobody agrees with you, even if you're like the weird like serial killer doing something that definitely not many people do, that still serves as like that person's picture of how all people ought to live, even if it doesn't have much power to persuade anyone to behave in the same way. So it's not about actual like causal connection to where your example rubs off on other people. It very well may, but it's not about that essentially. The point is that when you create your own essence, that serves as like a stand-in for how you think human beings should be living. And since none of these can take claim as the superior or the universally recognized version of how you ought to live, we just have to sort of observe all the different paradigms and essences that people create and make our own choices. So sometimes people say, no, it's not up to me. It's my family or whatever. I was raised in a religious household, so that's the reason I'm Christian. But you need to remember that in the same environment, some people will make different decisions, right? Like who makes the decision to follow the example of the parent as opposed to rebel against the parent? That's you. Who even makes the decision whether to believe in God or not? I mean, again, that's you. Someone can't just say to you, hey, you believe in God. You're welcome. You have to be the one who chooses to have that belief. So you cannot escape your individual freedom and personal responsibility in terms of how your essence is taking shape. And that's something that he continues to mention. Bad faith is when you try to avoid that personal responsibility for the way your essence is. So, yeah, we create ourselves. In this class, we've studied a few different views. Like when we were looking at the theory of time and the metaphysics of space-time, we had learned about views that there's no free will, and all the moments of space-time are fully set out, and therefore there's no action that you could take that would be contrary to the actual actions in your life. Well, for existentialism, though, we do have free will. We radically believe in the existence of free will. And that's the reason that according to this philosophy view, you do have the power to take control and shape your life however that you want. So I want to wrap that discussion of existentialism up at the beginning next time. And as perhaps is sometimes usual, it'll take maybe 5 or 10 minutes at the start of Friday's meeting. Then we'll take the rest of Friday to talk about Derek Parfit and his own argument as to what makes the human life go best. So you'll see a new view. Last word is this. Sartre is way different from Plato because Plato had a universalist view of the best human life. He said everyone should empower their intellect and reason so that it can preside over the passions and the appetites. That's something that we should all be doing, and it's a universal characteristic of humanity. With Sartre, it's much more individualistic. There's no one-size-fits-all pattern of the best human life. If you're the person who just wants to indulge in the appetites and ignore your reason, then that is the essence that you've created, and you believe that that's the best way to live. And so it's much more, intersubjective agreement, but there's no objective fact about the best pattern of life. Each one of us creates it from our own perspective using our free will in accordance with our values. Okay, guys, so thanks again for everything. It was a good meeting. Appreciate your attendance as usual. We just got a couple more meetings, so let's try to stay together and get to the next week. But for now, thanks everybody. And again, if you do need anything, let me know by email. So have a good one, and I'll see you on Friday then. Okay, bye-bye.